Please, we have Radostina Shopova from Wien, who will give the last presentation. The floor is yours, Radostina.
Okay, do you see my slides?
Yeah.
Right, so good afternoon. My name is Radostina Shopova, and I'm a second-year PhD student at Vienna Graduate School of Economics at University of Vienna. So I'm happy to present here today my joint work with Daniel Garcia and Martin Janssen on dynamic price competition whenever firms have private information regarding their unsold capacities. So we focus on markets such as the ones for hotel accommodation, on airline tickets, which share some common characteristics, namely capacities are fixed well in advance and products are of perishable nature, meaning that if a product is not sold before a certain deadline, it loses its value. You can think about a hotel room for a particular weekend in July or a ticket for a particular flight. So in such markets, firms compete in prices over multiple periods, and it is impossible for them to know at each point in time whether the rival still has capacity to offer or not. So these features have not been studied together in an equilibrium model before, thus our motivation to write this paper. What is typically observed in such markets is that prices start at a relatively low and stable level, and closer to the deadline, they get adjusted more regularly, which results in increasing prices on average. And as the price changes become more volatile, we also observe a lot of price dispersion closer to the end of the selling period. So what we're interested in is how does uncertainty about competitors' available capacity affect the pricing decisions of firms? And can we potentially explain the empirical observations without the need to resort to any assumptions on changing demand conditions? What we are also interested in is what is the welfare implication and what is the impact of uncertainty on market power and profits of firms, as there is a seminal paper by Duty, which actually also inspired our research. And in this paper, he analyzes a model of dynamic price competition, but under complete information. And he shows that if at least one firm is capacity constrained and cannot cover the whole demand in all periods, then in fact, monopoly pricing is going to prevail in all selling periods. We're also interested in what are the incentives for firms to resolve the information problem, but due to time constraints today, I'm not going to discuss this explicitly. We are related to the literature on revenue management and also some quality papers on static price competition with private information about capacities. But the main contribution of our paper is that we are the first to analyze dynamic price competition setting with private information regarding capacities and derive the equilibrium strategies of firms. So how we do that? Well, as I said, we were inspired by this seminal paper by Duty. And what he analyzes is a duopoly model where firms compete over multiple periods. And in each period, there is a single myopic consumer who has a reservation value for the homogeneous product which firms offer. Now, to keep things as simple as possible, we analyze only 2 periods, and we normalize the valuation of the consumer to be equal to 1, as well as the cost of production to be equal to 0. So in our model, basically a constrained firm is a firm that has an initial stock of 1 unit and can cover demand in only 1 period. And an unconstrained firm then has 2 units and can cover demand in all selling periods. So the novelty in our paper is that we introduce uncertainty, so each firm can be constrained with a common prior probability of alpha. The game evolves in the following way. Nature starts and chooses types. Each firm learns her own type, and then in the first period, they simultaneously set prices. A consumer arrives to the market, observes the prices, and if these are below his valuation, he buys at the cheapest firm. And we assume that if firms set equal prices, then they also sell with equal probabilities to the consumer. Then at the beginning of the second period, firms observe the outcome of the first period, meaning prices and who sold the unit, and if necessary, update beliefs about rivals' capacity using base rule. Then once again, they compete in prices and profits are realized. We assume that there is no discounting in order to abstract from any incentives for firms to sell early. So as this is a dynamic game of incomplete information, the solution concept we use is perfect Bayesian equilibrium, and therefore we start our analysis from the second period. Now, what is interesting in this period is that we find that there is no equilibrium in pure strategies. To understand this, suppose firm 1 was the one to sell a unit in the previous period. This means that firm 1 knows for sure firm 2 still has capacity. Now, from the point of view of firm 2, the game is similar to the one analyzed by Janssen and Rasmussen, namely that for firm 2, there are two possible scenarios. With some posterior probability theta, firm 1 was initially constrained, had only one unit, and is now completely sold out and out of the market. So with this probability, firm 2 is actually a monopolist and can charge the maximum price. However, with the remaining probability, firm 1 can still be active in the market and is going to undercut the price of firm 2. So the optimal decision of firm 2 is to randomize her pricing decision by mixing over the price interval theta 1 with putting a mass point at the top. So if firm 1 is also active in the market, she's going to price over the same interval, and both firms are going to expect a profit of theta. Now, moving one step back and looking at the first period, we can clearly see that prices in this period can potentially serve as a signal of firm's type. However, most importantly, there does not exist a separating equilibrium in pure strategies, as if a constrained firm is able to signal herself with a price in the first period and sell out, then an unconstrained firm has an extraordinary incentive to copy this signal, sell with some probability, and then in the second period undercut whoever is left in the market. So what we find is that the unique equilibrium in pure strategies is a pooling equilibrium where both firms price at alpha. Now, alpha is the minimum price that a constrained firm is willing to accept and sell in the first period, as she could always price at a very high level, not learn anything from the first period, and expect alpha for her sole unit in the second period. Of course, an unconstrained firm, if she faces favorable beliefs in the second period, has incentives to undercut, thus our equilibrium is consistent with the intuitive criterion developed by Cho and Krebs. Now, our pooling equilibrium also has something to say about the empirical observations I mentioned earlier. We see that firms price in the beginning at a lower and stable price, and then we observe more volatile prices, which are also higher due to the mixing in the second period. Now,
2 minutes, yes.
Yes, 2 minutes, thank you. So now to also talk about a little bit about the market power and the implications for information sharing in such markets. This complete information model predicts, as I mentioned earlier, that there are going to be monopoly pricing in all periods. But we see that under incomplete informations, firms could not achieve monopoly pricing, thus they expect ex ante lower profits in the pooling equilibrium. So if they decide to exchange the information on capacities prior to the price competition phase, and especially for small alpha, they can significantly improve their profits, so up to 33% better. They can decrease prices, which, however, is going to harm consumers. So in such markets, information sharing is actually anti-competitive. So to summarize, complete information about rivals' capacity clearly overstates firms' market power, as uncertainty drives them to price more competitively and reduces their profits. And we also offer a supply-side explanation for why firms would set higher and more random prices closer to the end of the selling periods. Now, in the paper, we also characterize other equilibria. And as we see that information harms firms, we also analyzing two additional extensions, incentives for anti-competitive disclosure, or the possibility for firms to spy on their rival. Now, I invite anyone who's interested and has more questions to ask them in GatherTown. I thank you very much for the possibility to present here today, and I thank you very much for your attention.